Namaste. Welcome along to ASMY cooking classes. Today we're going to cook a 3-ingredient vegan scone. So there's a few tricks to scones. I've been practicing a little bit and we've ended up with a pretty good finished product. The consistency is going to be different without the dairy, but it's really good still. And you can change it up if you're not a vegan. You can add some dairy and I'll explain where you can add that. So what we've started off with is some self-raising flour, 3 cups, and you need a fairly, decent sized bowl. And I've put a little bit of salt in, so we didn't count that one. That makes it like a 3.5. It's really not, you don't have to use salt if you're not a salt lover. A teaspoon of salt goes in with the 3 cups of self-raising flour. If you like a more salty scone, of course, add more. And some people don't like salt at all, so you can leave it out. It's not going to make any difference to the consistency of your scone. So you just make a well in the center. Make sure the salt's mixed in well. Make a little well in the center, and then we're going to add a cup of lemonade and a cup of coconut cream. We want it quite thick and fatty because this is the only fat in the scone. Usually scones use butter, but we're using the coconut cream. And if you aren't a vegan, you can add pouring cream instead of the coconut cream. So we're going to pour that in to the well, and then we're going to use a metal spoon because it's got a thin side, and we want to be as gentle with this mix as possible. Otherwise you're going to end up with much denser scones rather than nice light fluffy scones. So as little movement as possible to get this together. Okay, so just very gently fold and turn. As few strokes as you possibly can. Now, if you find that your mixture is a little bit runny, just add a bit more flour. I found this mixture was best with almost 1 cup of coconut cream, but just not quite. Just a little less than 1 cup. So that's pretty much together now. It only took like 6 or 8 strokes. Okay, so we're going to just lightly flour our hands. A little bit wet, so I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit over that. We've just got to pull the dough together so we make a ball. And you'll probably find that every mix you make is going to be slightly different. Flour and pastries are like that. You never get it exactly the same every time. So you're just going to have to maybe add a little more flour if you need it. And this needs a little bit more, not much, just a little sprinkle. Don't add too much all at once, so you might end up with dry, and then you've got to add more liquid, and then it ends up a bit of a fiasco. Okay, so we've got that ball of dough together now. Just scrape the rest up. Okay, now to make very light scones, it's recommended that you sit the dough for about 10 minutes. But we're not going to do that today because we don't have time to wait for 10 minutes, and I didn't have time to make another batch. So we're going to lightly flour this bench. And we're going to place the dough on it, just coat it in the flour. As you can see, I'm being very gentle with it. So the reason you would let it sit is just to let the gluten relax. I'll just wash my hands. But I honestly, I've made this without resting it, and I really didn't notice a heap of difference. So, but if you've got time, it is recommended that you let it rest for about 10 minutes or so. And it's not going to rise or anything, but it's just going to rest the gluten. So we've got this nice ball here now. We've brought the dough together, pat it down a little bit. And then we're going to flour the rolling pin. And we're just going to very gently roll this dough out. Now we want it quite thick, so about 2.5 to 3 centimeters. Doesn't need a lot of rolling, just enough to get it into a nice flat dough. Okay, that's probably enough there. And we've got a cookie cutter. I did do huge cookie cutter, like huge cookies, but they didn't work so well. It's better to have a smaller one so that they're higher. So this is probably 2.5, 3 inches, maybe 4 or 5 centimeters. So we're just going to put a pile of flour on the table here, and then we're going to just flour the cookie cutter. And when we cut the dough, it should have this you hear the sound of air coming out of it. Yeah, you can hear that air. And don't twist it. You want to just pull it straight out. There you go. And this, what happens is that it's got a lot of layers there. So you don't want to twist and ruin those nice layers. So this usually makes around about 8. I don't know if you can hear that. Let me just roll this up very gently. Just to pull it together. We don't want to waste any, but who cares if they're a little bit out of shape? They're still going to taste good. So we just roll that out a little bit. And get a few more out of this. That was a little bit weird, but I'm sure it'll get eaten. And you can just make the last little one for the kids. They always like the weird one at the end. That's the one we used to fight over when we were younger. So there you go. There's the non-waste one. So we ended up with 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 10 out of that batch. Okay, so it's important that you heat up your baking tray first. And we've got a hot oven. It's already been preheated to 220, so quite a hot oven. And the scones should be in the top quarter of the oven, so sort of right up the top, because that's where most of the heat goes. Heat rises, so pop it in the top because you want that heat from the oven. It's very important to have a hot oven for scones. Okay, so we'll get our baking tray out. Just going to put a towel down so we don't burn the bench. Okay, and then we're going to flour the baking tray. Just lightly flour it. And then we're going to pop the scones in. It's important that we keep them close to each other. They should be touching, and this helps to support them as they rise. There's a little weird one at the end. Okay, and we pop this in the oven for 10 to 15 minutes. Oh, it's good to glaze the top just so it browns up a little bit. I'm just using a little bit of soy milk. You could use a little bit of maple mixed with the milk. Apparently that makes a nice colour as well, especially if you're going to have sweeter flavoured scones. So just a little bit of glaze on the top. You could put some vegan butter on the top too if you prefer. And then they go in the oven for 15 to 20 minutes. And this is the finished product here. So we've got our scones here, nice and high. When you tap them, they've got a bit of a hollow sound to them, then you know that they are ready. And if you break it open, that's how you should break open scones. It's still quite nice and fluffy and sort of a little crispy on the outside. So there you go. 3 ingredient, or 3 and a little bit ingredient vegan scones. You can have these with butter on them, vegan butter, or you can have jam and whipped coconut cream, which is quite nice as well. Or if you're into making cashew cream, is nice as well on top. So halve them out, put your jam and cream on and enjoy. We'll be having these for the mantra room tonight, so make sure you come along for kirtan and you'll get a scone. Namaste.